Okay, any questions?
No, thank you.
Alright.
This is great.
Just years worth of questions.
Okay. So I'm gonna do a couple of like kind of quick maneuvers here and just and I'll go back through it again and kind of show what I'm doing here. But I'm gonna use some of those drag, rotate, mirror commands that we were talking about. So if my building isn't going to be this basic shape, if for example I know that my overall building, um, let's draw this in as a rectangle, is going to be 60 by like 110 feet, right? But it's not going to be a 60 by 110 foot brick. Um, if you know that your building has that overall dimension, you can select the walls that you have in here and drag copies of them. Um, right, and so, um, right, so I can drag copies throughout. And one of the coolest things to me in ArchiCAD is the command click or control click in AutoCAD, or sorry, not AutoCAD, in PC. So in Mac, it's command, and it gives you the scissor icon. So command click is going to trim these walls out to each other. And I can start to kind of sculpt out the shape of this building based on um, those walls that I have copied around. So you can get a pretty detailed, complex design together just by sort of starting with a cube and sculpting it out into the shape that you need it with simple drag, copy, and command click. So there is no like short. I don't think there is a shortcut for edit, reshape. No, there is also split command. But yeah, the command click doesn't, the scissor icon doesn't have its own function. Now let's just, as an example, say that I've got multiple walls and I want to break all of these walls from this point, but I want to keep them for some reason. That's where the split command, this little hatchet icon or edit, reshape, and split. If I split based on a vector, so hit split and break from here, it keeps those walls. So then I can offset those walls up a distance. Or maybe keep one of them and delete the others, or whatever I need there. So command click and split command are both great for that. Additionally, if I have a bunch of vectors, and these could be beams, they could be walls, they could be lines, polylines, whatever. And maybe they have different origins, but I want all of them to extend to the same edge. I want to extend them all uniform. That's where the adjust command, this little adjust option here, or under edit, reshape, and adjust. My shortcut for it is command equals or command minus. They both work on my keyboard. Oh. And that'll allow you to adjust to a single vector. It is going to adjust to whichever end is closest. So if I wanted them to adjust to this point here to the left, that's where I would have to use the split command, right? Because if I hit adjust here, it's going to adjust them to the left. If I wanted to adjust the right hand in, that's where I would have to split them based on that vector and delete the remainder. Additionally, if you have two vectors that are not intersecting, any non-parallel vectors, this little intersect option, again under edit, reshape, and intersect, is going to find where those two vectors come together. There's also options for fillet and chamfer if you have two vector-based components. Let me make sure that these are horizontal beams. It's not going to want to play nice. Right, so if I want a radius on those, the fillet and chamfer option here, again under edit and reshape, I can either say that it has a chamfer or a fillet, and I can give it its radius or its distance. And then it's going to chamfer that. If you have a slab or something that it's more planar, and I only want to chamfer one edge of that, that's where the pet palette comes in. So if I click on this edge right here, I can say fillet and chamfer that edge. and say that that has a 5-foot radius as well. And that's only going to chamfer that one edge. If I wanted to chamfer all edges, then I could use the fillet and chamfer and say all edges have a 5-foot radius. Okay. Other things that can be useful with the pet palette, especially with regards to kind of planar elements, is this offset edges option. So you can offset one edge of a group of vectors or of a plane out, or you can offset all edges out. So if it needs to become whatever 2 feet bigger, I can make that 2 feet bigger. One area that I use this on, I know that there's 100 different ways to model foundations and footings, but one way I like to model footings is with the slab tool. So if, for example, I wanted a strip footing around this whole building, obviously the structural engineer is going to have his foundation plan. We just need foundations to show up in section typically. So I'm going to use that same magic wand function, and I'm going to magic wand a slab around this whole building. You can see here that it jumped inside to outside. That's just the reference line. I wasn't very careful about my reference lines on that.
So you just did that by clicking one point?
Yeah, so I just hold down the space bar and click on the vector, the reference line of that wall, and it'll find the perimeter or the reference line all the way around that space. Now, if I want a strip footing to go all the way around this building, if this is my footing, I can grab this offset all edges, and let's just say it offsets out, I don't know, 1.5 feet. Maybe it's a retaining wall or something like that. And then hit here and offset a copy of it in. So to do that, I click the offset all edges, and I'm hitting the Alt key or the Option key. And you know you hit it right because it gives you the little plus icon on the cursor there. So I'm offsetting all edges, and I'm offsetting a copy of that. And now I can grab the edge here and use the subtract area or reduce area option on the pet palette. Hold down space again to magic wand that inner area. And then I have a strip footing around the whole building.
You have to delete that inner one still, right?
Correct, yeah. So I select that inner piece right there and just delete it.
Yeah, okay.
Or, I mean, a lot of times actually what I'll do is I'll offset the inner area back out and then change its settings to be like a vapor barrier that's like 1/16 of an inch thick. And then that becomes my my operator to trim out my site mesh.
Oh.
So yeah, you can keep that extra thing, and if we look at those together.
You trim out your site mesh to the inside face of wall, not to the exterior face of wall?
Usually, yeah, because I usually want the foundation, basement, stem walls to be trimmed to the site as well, so that when they move, they're trimming the site. I don't have to worry about like being overly fussy about things.
Okay.
Again, that's another one of those where like case by case, there's, I mean, 100 different ways and combinations of ways to do it. But yeah, I would typically model this as like a vapor barrier to the inside face of my foundation, and do a subtraction with upward extrusion.
Okay. And you can do the same thing with like a rat slab or something like that. Yeah.
A rat slab, or if it's a full basement or daylight basement, you might have like a full 4 or 6 inch concrete slab that you would have as the operator. Same, yeah, same concept.
What was the combination of keypad and both the command to select the perimeter of that shape?
Of the original walls.
Yeah.
So I select the slab tool and I just hold down space and I get the magic wand cursor. The magic wand is going to find any interconnected vectors that define a boundary, and it's going to fill that in.
Well, I was pretty happy putting it around. I was trying to replicate that.
Yeah.
Quickly fell behind steps. Starting with step 1. I was like, wait, hold up. I want to try that. Slab drawer. Oh.
Are you re-recording?
Yeah, this is recorded.
Okay, great.
We've got more stuff on this on recording.
Okay, we all kind of clear on that for the most part. So other things about that, like if you had a stair opening in a slab, that would be the same thing, where if I draw a stair opening here, you can draw that in. One of the cool things is that if I click on that edge, I can drag that wherever it needs to sit. So notice it only adjusted that one polygon. So I can adjust the boundary of that. I can add a node to that, stretch it. I can move it using the drag command. If I reselect the whole thing, it's going to move the whole thing. But if I just click on that inner boundary, I can then adjust that. And that can be useful because I might need, like, maybe there's a strip footing that needs to come across this way. So if I grab that edge right there, I can hit plus and add the strip footing here and get really sculptural that way. If you have, maybe there's like conditions where it's partial crawl space, partial basement, or you have like a foundation that steps down a site. So if it splits from here and steps down, let's just take a look at this. So here I've got, let's change this to the right building material. I'll make it a 10-inch thick footing. I'm going to use the split command and we'll break it along that edge right there. So now I have a slab right here and a slab right here. And if I isolate these out in 3D, you can see here. So if this is, let's say, I don't know, 4 feet below. So we'll hit Command 9, Control 9, and then -4. That'll drop that down 4 feet. But I want to connect these two slabs. So what I could do is I can draw a slab here. Using the pet palette, I can then extrude this one to here. I could also even, like, because we're not going to have a big chunky pillar right there, I could say that this has like a 60-degree edge or something like that and chamfer that in for a stepped footing. So I know that most residential architects don't get this involved in modeling detailed foundations and stuff. But I've worked on plenty of homes before where they have complex sites, and working with the engineer, we had to do foundation axons, and we can do that really quickly in ArchiCAD with things like slabs, beams, walls.
I can definitely foresee us modeling a thing like that if it needs to exist.
I had a contractor once that even he really struggled to understand like where we had beam pockets, where the different thicknesses of walls were. He couldn't read a set of floor plans very clearly. I think he was just
Should have fired him.
he did get fired. But not before he did irreparable damage to the project. But anyway, it was like, I think that the problem was he was so used to just doing cookie cutter 2-foot stem wall kind of projects. And he didn't realize he was in over his head until he'd already got the bid. So, but we did put together some color coded axons for him to understand exactly what the walls were and where they went. And you can do that really quickly in ArchiCAD with 3D Axon 3D documents. I don't know that we're going to have time today to get into that, but if that's something that you down the road want to take a look at, we absolutely can. Okay, so that's a little bit more about modeling stuff. I do want to get into some more of the view settings and attributes a little bit today, because those are still kind of on the fundamental side of ArchiCAD. Do you have any questions about kind of the basic modeling tools and editing functions we've talked about so far?
I think we'll have to just get into it more.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into attributes a little bit, because this does speak more to getting your model to that next level, right? Because at first, it doesn't really matter what this wall is. It just matters that it's here. When we're talking about like really early schematic, kind of even design, doing partie diagram kind of stuff. But eventually, what this wall is going to matter. And so selecting that wall, we could see that that's an SD wall. What that means is if we right click and say edit the composite, like we just did on Todd's computer with his walls, we can see that these composites are made up of a series of building materials. These building materials are defined as either finish, other, or core. That core is what defines where that reference line sits, if it's to the face of core or to the face of finish. So if I were to adjust this 2x6 wall to say have 5/8 gyp board, the project wide, all of my walls that are using this composite attribute are going to update to 5/8 inch. For that reason, if I'm going back to my foundation here, for example, I might want this to be a concrete wall, but even if I don't know what that concrete is, I want it to be a composite. I could just easily say that it's a concrete wall, and that it's 8 inches thick. But now every time I need to, let's say the engineer comes back and says, no, all the walls need to be 10 inches thick. I need to find all of my 8-inch concrete walls and change them to 10 inches in the wall settings. Whereas if they were a composite here, SD wall concrete, if I were to right click and say edit selected composite and change this to 10 inches, all of those composites change project wide. So even if it's something like this where you don't have layers and layers of building components on an element, I would still use a composite or prefer a composite as much as possible. There are additional settings in the walls if we look here. So that's composite versus basic extrusion. There's also this complex profile. I avoid complex profiles for walls, and I'll show you why here in just hopefully a couple of clicks. So if I have two walls, well, and you can even see here on this wall right here, notice like how the wall actually kind of notches around. The way walls intersect is that the building materials try to cope to each other or interlace with each other. They don't miter to each other. So if I have two walls that are using a complex profile, and let's just find something that's got a fun curvy shape. We disappeared for some reason there. I get jumped way up. Anyway, but you can see here, this wall right here, for example, if we isolate that out, is not a nice clean miter, right? It's trying to find a coped edge for how that interacts with the other wall. That adds a lot of extra polygons to ArchiCAD. I've seen just 4 walls with a soffit and a ram's crown and a gutter profile kill a file before. That's sort of an extreme case, but it does happen. As opposed to the beams, which same exact profile. I'm assuming we can find that here. Yep, right there, crown molding. And we'll bring that up in 3D. It doesn't create that same coping issue. It's going to find just where those intersect with each other and create a single polygon. So instead of having an extra 30 or 40 polygons at each junction, you only have one.
Because it actually miters.
Yes, correct. And even more than that, like if it's not even at a 90 degree, it's going to find that miter and it's only going to add one polygon to that face. It does get a little bit messy if you have like sloping beams coming into horizontal beams. That's a whole other issue that we might do like a breakout session some other week on. But for right now.
Backing up, you're saying model with beams, not with complex wall.
If it's anything that requires like an extruded shape, the wall works great for simple extrusions. If it has more complexity to that, either model it with extra walls or model it with extra beams as kind of to augment, supplement the wall shape. Now that's not an absolute. You know, there might be cases where you have big canted walls that you don't want to use the beam tool because you can't place windows into beams. Windows can only place into walls. So there may be exceptions to that. There certainly are reasons that the complex profiles work for walls. Just bear in mind that you might have file performance issues if you use it prolifically throughout your project. And that would, I mean, if you have something like that where there's like a kind of feature wall design concept where we have big canted trom walls or something like that, or a wall that has like a big profiled cap designed to it, or sweeping curve to it or something like that, it'd be great to get on a Zoom session and just kind of hash out what the design intent is, and maybe there's other ways that we can model it. Okay. So that's composites and complex profiles. The complex profile manager is right here, complex profile manager. Basically, it's anything that you can draft out. The composites are just parallel extrusions, literal cubes, blocks. In the wall tool, they can technically be canted or splayed, but for the most part, they're just parallel components. The complex profile can be literally any extrusion. Where the composites get applied to walls, slabs, roofs, and shells, the complex profiles get applied to walls, beams, columns, railings, and then it shows library parts, but that's really the stair tool. So if you have like a custom stair nosing or something like that, you can model that as a complex profile. If we look at this here, it's literally just fills. It's extrusions of these fills. There's a lot more to it that you can get into, like modifiers where we could say the depth of the footing is different than the total height of the wall. For kind of back to basics, we're definitely getting our cart and our horse backwards here, though. So I do want to take a look at surfaces because that's something that, in my opinion, is really instrumental to early SD. You want to start exploring materiality of your project. So understanding how the surfaces work, understanding the basics, very fundamentals of how to create new surfaces, also very useful. So for example, if we just take a look at a couple of walls, maybe a couple of slabs here, let's pull these up in 3D. These are super, super dark. Looking at the wall settings, if I select these two walls and hit Control T, Command T, I see the wall surface overrides here. I'm a big advocate for surface overrides. Surface overrides basically say that I don't need a separate chipboard or paint building material, right? Looking at this wall, right? It's made up of these layers. It has chipboard over framing over chipboard. I don't want to have a separate chipboard building material for every single color of chipboard I have in my model or finish of chip wallboard I have in the model. So surface overrides allow me to say that that same composite here can be dark gray. It can also be green if I want it to. So you can override them globally using that same composite. One can be green, one can be salmon.
Right, so that allows us to manage with fewer wall types.
Exactly.
Using fewer favorites. Does that have any impact on scheduling if you wanted to say, populate a room finish schedule?
In my experience, the room finish schedules are highly manual anyway. It's really tricky to, it's not impossible, but it's tricky to get accurate surfaces. And beyond that, the naming of those surfaces you're pulling that exact attribute name into your schedule if you're using the automated attribute schedule, right? So going back to where we started off, you can technically schedule surfaces. It's just really difficult to filter that down to just what you want and just for the rooms that you want. It's usually so much maintenance and struggle that by the time you get it figured out, it changes and you've got to go figure it out again. It's so time consuming that you could do it in Excel faster than you could do it with those automated schedules. So usually what I do, because I don't like the Excel option either, is I create an element schedule that lists just all of my rooms. And then the finishes or the materials of those rooms are manually input as schedule fields.
Could we be doing that versus getting away from Excel?
I think that it's a better solution than scheduling in Excel, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's still not great.
No, it's not.
It's still not like automated.
Is there a way you can use that keynote feature thing from like to tie like callouts and interior elevation to a schedule?
So yes, the keynote can be applied to elements, but it's not pulling information from those elements. The keynote is sort of its own island, and that's been a long since they brought the keynote in, which is I can't say it's long standing. It's literally just been a year. But that was one of the big when I was testing that feature out is that it doesn't tie to properties, it doesn't tie to attributes. It's just sort of lives on its own island, unfortunately. It's great because it is global. It can apply to everything, but everything else can't apply to it, if that makes sense. It's sort of a one-way street. It's an output only kind of solution.
What if every wall assembly in our projects has two layers, I'm just hypothetically, it has two layers of interior finish. One is drywall or plywood, and the next is the actual finish layer, which could be wall covering, it could be anything, right? And because we're an architecture and interiors team, what if like the architecture team built the walls with, studs and, one layer of substrate beyond that toward the interior. And then we said, okay, interiors team, your job is to come in when we have a, added finish. It's not just a paint, or maybe even if it is a paint, you go in there and you add a layer of thickness on top of that, basically an extra interior wall on top of that. Would it then schedule?
Yeah, if you had, yes. So if this is my main wall and this is my finish wall, and I'm just going to put them side by side here, right? If I said that this is my finish wall, and that finish wall doesn't have to be a composite, it can be anything, right? So I could say that this is tile finish, right? If I had a property in here that said that this is for finish only, then I could say schedule things that are called out as finish only. And then I could schedule out their color, their name, their area, the room that they're in. That becomes a lot more simple. But if I want to say that just the surface override for this face of that wall in this room, that gets a lot trickier. But if this thing is separate, right, as a separate component, and I want to say that this is, here just as an example.
Just a layer of finish, yeah.
Finish level paint in room 1, right? I could say that I want a new schedule. And the criteria says element ID includes paint, add fields, element ID, area. Where are we at here? Anyway, yeah, there we go. Inside the wall, surface. I think it's actually under material because they never actually updated that. Yeah, so you can the material name, all of that stuff. There's all that information is applied to that. That wall should show up in there. Yeah, so there's that wall. It has that area. It has whatever information I pull from it.
Okay, so that's one way we could go about this. For example, we draw all of our 5/8 inch drywall at 3/4 of an inch because by the time they moto over and everything, it adds a little bit of thickness. It's in reality it's a little less than 3/4, but whatever, right? We could start with a 5/8 inch typical substrate, and then if we know it's going to be paint, we'll just add an 1/8 inch layer on top of that. That schedules all the way around. It essentially means we have to apply a second layer of finish to every interior wall surface, which you could argue is good or bad. And the other way to do it, another question I have is, okay, let's say that I don't care about the efficiency of having fewer wall types, but I do care about the ability to schedule all my interior surfaces correctly without having to manually do it. Could I create a wall type for every condition with every different surface, everything, and do it that way?
Absolutely, because I could have a you could create a building material, and this is how you would have to do it, is I would have to create a building material and call this paint red, right? And that would be whatever generic interior, the building material itself or the fill itself doesn't really matter. But I would have to have a separate building material that would be applied to each composite or each assembly to say that this is what's getting scheduled for that room.
Right. And then if I want to go back and tag all those walls, they're all going to have a million different wall types.
Yes, if you're tagging them by their composite name, but typically what I would do is I would say this is wall assembly type 01, and to do that, I'm just going to say that this is wall ID W01, right? And then when I tag that with my label tool, all I'm doing there is I'm saying that this is W01, and it's pulling that element ID. And you can use find and select, Command F, and I can find all walls that have that composite, right? So if I use that eyedrop command again, it's going to fill that out automatically. Find all those walls. If they need to update to be W02, I can change that here to be W02. And it updates those tags automatically. So it's actually pulling the element ID. I'm just using the composite to find those wall types, and then I'm unifying them to be the same element ID so that when I tag them, they get grouped that way.
So we could, in theory, have one wall type that has a million different interior surfaces on it.
Yeah.
Even though they're built out as separate composites, they have different in theory, composite names. We can give them the same identifier, so you can tag them with wall types like this.
Yeah, it just gets tedious kind of picking out by composite type if you have too many different composite types that are set.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
tag.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not
it's
perfect, but as usual, everything's a workaround.
yeah. Yeah. And that's both the sort of advantage and disadvantage of ArchiCAD is everything's a workaround, but at the same time, like if you hit a wall, there's always a workaround.
Okay.
All right. Let's get into the surfaces a little bit, so that looking at this corner here, because I don't want it to just be like you're doing a schematic model, what's in your template or what did they put in here already for you. Also note that like if you don't see the surface you're looking for, oftentimes it's because, or any attribute for that matter, they're sorted into folders. I always just pull out to the main list here and I get the whole list of all surfaces in the project. And every template, for some reason, going back 5-6 years now, ArchiCAD has had like all of these zone surfaces, all these override surfaces, MEP surfaces, things that I don't use. I don't know if you guys use. Maybe it's worth having a template follow up and trimming some fat there. But this is what's out of the box available as surfaces. You're never going to find like exactly what you want, or rarely going to find exactly what you want, but there are resources for finding better surfaces. So let's say, for example, I wanted this to be sort of an ashlar stone kind of surface. To create new surfaces, you're going to go to Options and Surfaces. This is the Surface Manager here. And you can see the same list that I was looking at before. If you go to New here at the bottom, you have options. I can duplicate an existing surface. I can replace an existing surface, or I can create a new surface from a catalog. Now there are a couple of catalogs. It looks like you guys only have the out-of-the-box catalog. I might be able to get you guys hooked up with that. There's what's called an additional surface catalog. It has something like a gigabyte's worth of surfaces, and they're all grouped into, well, it used to be CSI division. Now they got rid of the CSI component. But we'll go to stonework here. So, and again, none of this is going to be like exactly 100% everything you could ever hope for in a surface. You could certainly Photoshop surfaces up to do what you need, but these work really great for like just getting the ball rolling. If I know that I need like kind of a medium tan, dark brown kind of ashlar surface, I'm going to grab this one right here and say that's probably close enough, or maybe scroll through a little bit more. Yeah, we'll go ahead and use that one. And go ahead and say, okay, that's going to add it to your project here. Right out of the gate, we know that in elevation or anywhere that this shows up in 2D, it's going to show with the correct fill. One thing that you do have to adjust is it likes to dump pen 1 as the default pen for these. Pen 1 is typically, in most templates, a very heavy pen. Yeah, 0.35 millimeter pen for a stone surface on your elevation. It's going to look like super bold and thick. So usually what I'll do is I'll dump it down here to one of these gray pens, like a 0.09 millimeter, or maybe even a lighter 0.09 millimeter light gray pen. That's going to be how it shows up in elevation. Here we have that surface that was part of that catalog of surfaces. If you don't have that surface image here, it's going to use this surface color. So those are the two options, either surface image or surface color. If you do Photoshop something up from scratch, you can upload or add a surface to the project here. I don't have an example of that, but it would just be any Photoshop. It could be PNG or JPEG. One word of warning is check the file size on the PNG or JPEG. Try to keep it under 2 to 3 megabytes at the most. The reality is a couple hundred kilobytes is usually more than enough resolution for most surfaces. But that's how you would add a custom surface to it. You can change the scale and the size. Just note if you change this, this does not change with it. So then your elevation and your 3D are not going to match. There's a couple of other things worth noting, and that's these the color emission. I usually like to bump that up even if it is black. And then the specular color, I usually change that to black as well. Otherwise, it gives it kind of a hazy gray look. Um, and there's sort of a magic number for the reflection settings here to get it to be more of a matte to semi-gloss finish. Otherwise, they end up either really washed out or really dark. And that number combination is 85, 85, 10, and 12. And I can't tell you how I came up with that number, just trial and error, trying to match. I think it was trying to match like Benjamin Moore paint codes or something like that. And that's what shows up best on 4 and 5K resolution screens, is that number combination with both emission and specular glowing set to black. So now taking a note here, that's called Stone 1027. This can get renamed at any point. It doesn't matter. Because the attributes are not actually called to elements by their name. They're called to elements by their attribute index, which is sort of a behind the scene numbering convention. Now, if I were to apply this to a wall, for example, and then later on delete that surface and then recreate it, it's probably still going to show as missing because it's not calling by this attribute name, it's calling by the index number. So unless that index number gets recreated, but that's again sort of cart and horse situation where I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and say okay here, and we'll apply those to this element again as surface overrides. Ashlar light right there, and then we can see that surface. If this were a tile surface, maybe we want it centered, the tile centered on the room, for example. What you can do is you can select that element. You can go to options, or sorry, document, creative imaging, align texture, and set origin. They really bury it back there for you. But that's the location of that setting for defining the origin of a surface. And then you click and it redefines the origin. Oftentimes there's a case where I need it to be set, I don't know, X distance over and up from a corner. There's nothing to snap to here. Let's say I want the origin to be 2 feet over and 2 feet up. The morph tool, Todd, I saw that you were already playing around with the morph tool for some basic massing, but it's also great for like just sketching 2D stuff in 3D. It can be a little bit finicky, but if I know I'm already snapping to this edge and this edge, and I want the origin to be 2 feet over and 2 feet up, right? I don't know if you can see that there, but there is this blue vector right here. So if I select this wall and go Document, Creative Imaging, Align Texture, Set Origin, and then click on that point, that's where my origin of that surface pattern comes from. You can then delete the morph. It does, setting the origin to a point only sets it to a point relative to the XYZ planes. It doesn't set it to or associate it to that element. Okay, so far? All right. I think the last thing that I want to go over, because we're kind of coming up on our time here and I'm about to lose my voice. I can feel it any second now. So we do have these walls and they do have this, this composite. There's a few things that you should know about view settings. So attributes get applied to the elements. View settings get applied to the view map. The view map being the second tab here. The view settings are really what define what that view is. What layer combinations show what layers are visible or not. That's a pretty simple concept, right? It's on-off switches, right? So the existing plans show the annotations coordination. They don't show the annotations at FFP. So it's just on-off switches for various elements in ArchiCAD. But as far as how things appear in ArchiCAD, if we were to, let me dump in a door, for example, just so we can take a look at that too. Right, so that door shows kind of simple here. The way doors show is based on model view options. Model view options are like level of detail control in ArchiCAD. So looking at like the SD5 schematic plans, I can see I have controls for the doors showing with or without markers. So on my floor plans, it's going to show the door and window markers. On my SD plans, it's not. So that gives you global control for how slabs that abut each other show. Are we going to show zone stamps? Do columns show with their X symbol or not? There's also level of detail controls for curtain wall options, stair options, railings. Um, there's level of detail controls for doors, windows, and skylights. So that's why the door is not showing with its door leaf thickness because it's set to medium under that model view option. So for any view using this SD plans model view option, this is how doors, windows, columns, etc. all are going to show. And we can see that adjust here if I go to the 1/4" plans, for example. The doors show with more detail. Looks like there might not be, well, there is a marker showing. I don't know why it's not on. Huh. I don't know why that door marker is not showing on here. It does say that it's got an HPD marker 27, so I don't know what's going on there. I'm not going to try and troubleshoot that just right now. The other thing that I wanted to review was the graphic overrides. So where the composite says that this is how this stuff shows up, the pens show this is how thick those pen weights are. The building materials show that this is how these fills are. All of those are default settings for how things appear in ArchiCAD. The graphic overrides are the exceptions. This is how I want things to show in these other instances. So on my reflected ceiling plans, for example, I might set up a graphic override to say that I want to show countertops, but I want to show them really light gray and I want to show them dashed. So you can say if the element is a countertop, override those attributes. Let's go ahead and switch this to the SD5 or 6, whatever. Oh, here we go. Schematic plans, black and white. So switching that graphic override here changed the appearance of those composites to no longer have those composite layers and to show with basic gray fills. What that's doing and how that's working is it adds these adds these rules that basically says cut fills are dark gray. What that means, so that rule gets applied to this view. That's the view that's being used. These rules are applied to that view. And that rule is basically saying that if the element type is a wall, literally the cut fills dark gray is only applying to walls. It's another if-then criteria set. So if it's a wall, we're going to override these things. And you can see here it says that we're going to override the line types to be solid. So even if it was an overhead wall in this case, it's going to show solid. The pen is going to show with pen 1. The fill type is going to be 100% fill. And the fill pens are going to be pen 131 for the foreground pen. Now you'll notice that there are 3 buttons after the fill and the fill pens. That's because there's 3 separate fill types in ArchiCAD. There's a drafting fill, a cover fill, which is the fill that gets applied to the surface. So that would be that stone fill that we were looking at when we created that stone surface. That's not being overridden by this, but the cut fills are. So it's only overriding the cut fills of walls. So that's graphic overrides, and they can be added and elaborated on as many different rules. I do recommend having more rules than complex criteria within a rule set. So if you're trying to isolate down to just one element type, you can create a criteria that says, I'm just going to change the element ID of this wall to override this. I can get really specific. I can say that I want to create a rule that says override this red, and I'm going to say all types whose element ID contains override this. And in that case, we'll say that we're going to override the fill to be that, sure, and we'll make it red. And we could even override the surfaces here as well. So I could say override the surface to be red as well. An example of where this has been useful for me in the past. I have to reserve this. I've been trying not to reserve anything. I don't want to mess up a file. There, it highlights that. So where I've used this before, and they even have that in here, I think, as like an option for overriding. The out-of-the-box template I know has it for doing like what do you call it? Like the fire barrier plans or fire separation plans, where you need to show your 1 hour walls in an egress or ingress plan. So you can create those overrides to say that, yeah, I don't want to create a separate composite to say that this is 1 hour firewall. I just want to go into this wall and say that that wall type is rated as 1 hour. So there might be a property here that says that its rating is 1 hour. Um, and update that to show as an override in that wall setting. But it's most useful for me, in my mind, for like actual drawing, construction drawing, production drawing, schematic drawings, where I could say, this is going to be a composite that includes all these extra layers. But for my schematic plans, I just want to show it with a gray or a black or a white poché. Okay.
Got it.
Any questions on any of that?
I think it's going to be important to save this recording, post it to wherever we post it, then have it available for people because it might not be tomorrow when people are starting this, but in the coming weeks, so we will get these things.
Yeah, I'll try and scrub through and maybe put some timestamps because I upload them to YouTube, but because you guys have your sort of own playlist on YouTube, it's a private playlist only you guys have access to. So I'll put some timestamps on it so that as you're scrubbing through, or maybe even in the description, I'll give like this is when we talked about this, so you can kind of jump to what you're looking for, make it a
Sounds
little bit more accessible.
Also, I think like when we get into BIM manual and I get more into that, which I think we may just go ahead and use the kind of online format that you have as a starting point. Having these files and all the content like clearly identifiable in each video and making them easily searchable will be important.
Yeah, and I think that there's going to be a lot of kind of overlap and redundancy to a lot of these recordings, but at the same time,
There will be, yeah.
that's not necessarily the end of the world, right? Like having these resources available is the first step. So
we can see how consistent you are.
I'm as consistent as ArchiCAD.
Ooh. Yeah. All right. Fair
Well,
enough.
it's like I said before, it's all situational. Like what works on one project or for one person may not be the best thing for another project or another person.
Yeah.
I think as long as it's consistent. Well, first goal is like whatever method you use for any particular design or document goal should be consistent within a project. There's nothing worse than being like, okay, well, this is how I'm modeling this. And then you run into like some weird out of left field kind of situation where like, where did that come from? Why is it done that way? Like you don't want to be like extending roof overhangs and then realize suddenly you've got morphs involved in one wing of your building. Yeah, be consistent within the project first and foremost. Obviously, like if we can be consistent office wide, we'd be like the heroes of ArchiCAD users. That's a very lofty goal though. But
I think more consistency is better than less, though, and
absolutely,
especially when you got a team who's like all learning it, and some still using some of their practices from previous experience at other firms, all of whom use the program in different ways. Like, creating a standard that people can try to hit is very important.
Absolutely. And we'll work towards that. I mean, it should be pretty short order, especially if we keep having these kind of breakout sessions and having these discussions, building those resources. We'll get there pretty quickly. All right, I think that's the last that my vocal cords have for the day.
Great, wow.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. You guys have a great afternoon.
You too. See you, Patrick.
Thanks.
Bye, Patrick.
Bye.